Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Javari, and I am the owner and operator of Detroit Slot Boxing. So I've been getting a lot of questions about what Detroit Slot Boxing is. So I think it basically I give a little bit of an origin story um, that really has nothing more to do with the martial arts side, but how everything came to be. So one of those stories as a child, or both. My mother worked a lot, so and I grew up in Detroit, in West Side Detroit, and we lived mainly around the Joy Road, the Plymouth, Chicago area. I went to Cody and Brooks, and in another neighborhood I stayed in was off of Stopel. Stayed on Stopel between Grand River and Livernois, and I went to school over there originally. Um, because my mother worked so much, I had a babysitter who I eventually called my godmother. Um, Took care of me, and I spent the night over there. So I went to school over there, even though I didn't stay over there all the time. But even so, the story basically goes, I just had to fight a lot. I had to fight a whole lot. Maybe because I always seemed to be weak or sillier than the other kids or whatever else. But I was kind of like the person that people had to try to sharpen their teeth on. Um, so my first big fight was always with multiple people. And even when we were kids, and I can't remember if it was first grade or kindergarten. I remember we were had little afros and was doing paste in each other's hair, and I got jumped by six kids then. Um, and my mother just so happened to come pick me up that day and see me fighting and came and snatched me up. Um, Over the years, it never stopped. It just always was. Um, People always wanting to fight me, and that was just kind of what the hood was. I mean, and I tell this story because a lot of people don't know it. A lot of people don't understand it. So living over on Stopel with my godmother, uh, she was a wonderful woman and everything else. But once you walked out those doors, it was a whole different life. Had a dope house right across the street, and the kids, as much as we played, we also fought, and that just kept happening on and on and on. And I'm trying not to make this too long, but the other side of that is I got hit in the head with a brick over there. My skull was split open. Had to go to the hospital. We was fighting each other with bats and sticks and everything else. And somewhere in between playing hide and go get it, jump rope, rock teacher, and everything else, all this other stuff was going down. And when you're around that kind of violence, it changes you. It does something different. Then on the other side, I stayed on Rutherford for a long time, and that was there's other places we stayed, but that was one of the long existing places, and that was right in between Ellis and Joy Road, Chicago, Ellis, Joy Road, Greenfield area. Um, and again, it was just all the fighting, all the violence, and everything else. And as much as I remember all the fun times, I remember people trying to rob me for catching a bus, or just fighting the kids on the block, or fighting the kids from school. I was getting kicked out of school all the time and everything else. And my mother was just trying to do everything that she could to to help me, but I didn't tell her everything either because again she was working and I was a kid, and I know I didn't want to bring, even though I was getting in trouble in school at times, I didn't want to make my mom have to be home all the time because she did everything possible to take care of me. Um, so between living on Stopel and coming home to Rutherford, by the time I got in sixth grade, to say I had over 20, 30 fights was easy. I mean, to the point where they're just arms flailing, to the point where they're knocked down, drag out, to the point where they're pulling weapons. And I was just getting to the sixth grade. I remember just a couple of times. I don't even know if Evante, just kids trying to steal our candy when we used to buy candy, sell candy. I mean, and then they would we had to go home. We had to carry it all home, and kids would try to beat you up and take the candy before you got home and everything else. And I used to walk to school back and forth with this kid named Evante. And I think me and him maybe had to fight or push people off of us a couple of times. But, Evante lived in the hood just like I did. So I'm sure he had his scraps along with, with me, helping me protect myself. But it does, like I said, it does something to you. All the violence all the time. It seemed like it was every day. And then I went to Cody. But the funny thing is by the time I did all these fights and other situations, my mom finally bought another house that was further down, still same kind of hood. But it was funny because the hood of Rutherford and the hood of off Stouffville wasn't a lot of working individuals over there. And I'm not saying this to be judging. It wasn't. It was more, we had welfare, we had old school grandmas that just, was there just trying to live and retired. And just, and then, like I said, we had the dope houses and everything else. But when I moved to Stout, these kids was different, They was out just playing football in the middle of the street and baseball and everything else. And these kids had no idea what was 2 miles away, it seemed like, you know what I mean? And basically I had to change. And, everybody kind of thought I was a punk. They didn't realize I just didn't want to fight no more. Like, I just got tired of pulling knives on people and the violence that would happen. And being at junior high and watching somebody pull a gun on somebody. I don't think the kids, even though we all went to the same schools eventually, I don't think they understood what was happening down closer to the Greenfield Street. These kids was past Evergreen. And like I said, my mom she worked for the state. Most of the parents over there, they all had, decent jobs, and they just fought to take care of their kids and everything else. Everybody's grass was green. And it's funny how a neighborhood can form you and change. And not saying that these kids didn't struggle or never go through any things or that we never got into fights. It just wasn't every fucking day. It just wasn't all the time. So, so I say this is all these fights and everything else that I've been in real life or death, I should say, situations, right? And in the middle of all this, somehow I got exposed to martial arts by my Uncle Donald, who, taught me a lot of stuff when I would go down south. And then I took some martial arts at the Boys Club over on Michigan Ave in Illinois. And then I kept going and doing different martial arts, unbeknownst to my mom, because she was working all the time. I would just, if it was free or whatever else, I would get in or, try to, take a few classes here and there or whatever. And then I got to the military and then I got older, I've always been doing martial arts. But the key is I know what's out in the street. I know what happens. I've had guns put on me. I've had knives put on me. I've had all kind of scenarios happen that this is not what the story is about. But to understand that, first of all, the neighborhood formed who I am today. Unbeknownst to my mom, because my mom was a great mom and did all the things that she could do and teach me. But that hood, once you walk out the door, that's a whole nother story. And so but the common sense, my ability to have a conversation and everything else, that comes from Brenda. That comes from Brenda Hill, my mama. And just because I didn't sell drugs or do other things, or some of these other things like other people, don't mean I don't understand some of the scenarios of the hood. But anyway, that's the origin story. So all the fights I had makes me understand that I went back to where it was childhood, and we used to just stand in front of each other and smack each other and like box and move around and smack each other all the time. And, that was just like our way of learning how to fight. And it was called slap boxing. And So that all that came full circle, and all the taekwondo and judo and uh, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, kickboxing, Muay Thai, everything that I was introduced with still boiled down to no matter what kind of fancy move you learned, you had to be able to use number one and number two. That was it. Now, however you used it, that was the key. But I had had so many fights that hurt my wrist and got cut on my lip, head busted open a couple of times, got stabbed, had all these other things that happened that a lot of people don't know about. Um, but I formed the martial art that I'm doing now as a combination of everything that I've ever done, and understand that I didn't always have to ball my fist up to hurt somebody. And it wasn't always about hurting somebody as long as I was striking them and they weren't striking me. And that's one thing that I really had to understand. If I'm hitting you and smacking you and elbowing you, you're not hitting me. And I think a lot of times that the martial arts that is taught is unrealistic, and that people cannot differentiate the difference between I'm doing a drill and what's actually going to work on the street. And because the people that's teaching you never had a street fight, never had a real fight before. They look good, they look in shape, they look all these other things and aesthetically. And so we go to these people and say, hey, give me your knowledge. And this is not to knock these. Some of these instructors are great. Most of my instructors are really, really great. But the funniest thing is my best instructors have been some of the most, I hate to say it, like in their personal lives, like kind of fucked up individuals. My judo teacher was a great judo teacher. I mean, like, because the judo wasn't just about throwing people on the ground, more than it also encompassed the ground game, which he also did teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he taught a very realistic, I thought, judo techniques that really worked on the street, and he proved it because he would do it to us. And that his wrestling and ground game was on point. And a lot of us have split and went other directions now, and he's passed away. But the knowledge that he left behind with all of us was amazing. And he got his information from somewhere else and translated it to us. And now some of those people own gyms like Stars and Strikes, and he owned a gym at one time called Jackson MMA. And I say all of this is because there's real stuff out there. I'm not knocking traditional martial arts. I've done traditional martial arts. What I want to do is I want to give people the meat and the potatoes. I want to give them, look, somebody's running up on you. The truth is before they swing on you and they close the gap, you probably need to hit them. Is that what we normally learn? No. But if I get you to get a good palm and slap him in his face, he's got to consider something now, I don't know how much to talk about. I wanted to share that story. I don't know if everything's coming out right. But I wanted you guys to understand what Detroit Slapboxing is. Detroit Slapboxing is all the martial arts I ever trained in my life, broken down, made simple, and made effective for a real life scenario and a real life attack. Not just drills. I'm saying this person's coming in and trying to hit you. You need to move and hit them, or hit them and move, and where to hit them in different scenarios. I use stuff from Krav, I use stuff from Judo, and it's a slow but surely training process, because my goal is I need you to even just move first. I need you to just punch and kick and do these things. And then I'm going to tell you, hey, this is the technique you're doing and this is why it works. But at first, I just need you to move your ass. And everybody at the same time, everybody's training, but everybody is got their own moves and everything. And even though I might teach this technique to somebody else, it may not work the way for them as it might work for me or you. So we got to figure out what works for you. I'm just not going to cram something down your throat. What works for your body? what works for your size. So Detroit slap boxing is for everybody. It's for bigger, it's for smaller, and there's techniques that everybody can use to protect themselves. I've trained my kids, I've trained my wife, and I've trained a lot of people over the years, and I've learned the do's and don'ts, the bad and the good of the way that I teach, and the things also, the bad and the good of what's really effective on the street. Um, we do get into some weapons defense. We do get into basic weapon use, with a stick or a knife. And again, so I'm not saying I'm better than everybody. I'm not saying I'm more experienced than anybody else. And I'm not saying I'm the toughest person on the planet. What I'm saying is I can tell you what it's like and what it feels like to have a gun pulled on you. I can tell you what it's like to have someone try to hurt you on the street for real. And I'm still here to talk about it. So you take that however you will. Detroit Slap Boxing is now out of, we're training within a facility, cross Downriver CrossFit in Allen Road and Southfield. Okay, and that's the city of Allen Park. You come check us out, and there'll be information available and everything else. That's it. That's all I got to say. I feel a little like shy about saying all this stuff, but it's something that's been in my head for a long time, so I figure I would talk about it. All right, guys, you have a good one.